Welcome to the series of short lectures on silk by Alessandro Barrico with Dr. Vidya Prem Kumar. This is the third lecture in the series, and today we will be covering chapters 6 to 10 and its analysis. First, let's take a look at the summary of chapters 6 to 7. In these two chapters, Baldibu's backstory is established for us, even though there is still a lot of mystery around that man, because we are only given a background from the point when he arrives in the town of Lavaldew. He comes mysteriously into the town and directly goes and meets the mayor and shows him a silk scarf and asks him what it means. The mayor does not understand it and wants nothing to do with silk. What Baldibu was indicating at was it clearly something that the mayor did not understand because of his simple mindedness. So Baldibu realizes that he will not get the kind of political support that he is looking for establishing a silk industry in that town until he creates his own success story. So he builds a factory and a chapel around it and works quietly for the next 7 months to bring in the kind of money that this industry would do. Then he approaches the mayor again with the money he has earned and shows him how much profit can be earned through this particular profession and calls the mayor a blockhead for not having the foresight to see how it would have been helpful for his people. Despite this, he asks the mayor to sit tight and let him bring prosperity to the town of Lavaldew, which of course any mayor would only be too happy to do. So we see him supporting Baldibu in the establishment of a silk industry in the town of Lavaldew. 5 years later, there were 5 mills, and Baldibu didn't own all of them, which meant that others in the town were also now prospering because of the silk industry or the silk profession. Baldibu openly and happily shared his secrets with the others in the town who also wanted to take up this profession or establish a business in this field. And this is surprisingly paradoxical about Baldibu because he is a man who clearly likes luxuries and therefore ventured into a company or a business which would bring him a lot of money. But despite that, he is not somebody who is competitive and wants to keep all the trade secrets to himself. Rather, he enjoys the act of teaching others all that he knows about silk. Similarly, Baldibu also changed Joncourt's life 8 years ago, that is, a few years after establishing the silk industry in Lavaldew. Joncourt was the mayor's son, and Baldibu convinced his father to let Joncourt give up his military career and take on the job of trading in silkworms, which would be more profitable for him, thus rescuing him from a life in military which was basically designed by his father so that he could become more of a man. Joncourt was sent on his first trip to Europe on the Adele, which is a ship, and he came back in 6 months with the first set of silkworms that would become the profit making industry for the people in Lavaldew. Baldibu only asks him about the dolphins that swam by the ship in context of the entire journey. He does not asking about the adventures or any other or even the business aspect of the journey. Or he does not even ask for how the money was spent that was given to Joncourt to undertake this journey. Thus showing again an idiosyncrasy that Baldibu had. He is a man of many contrasting nature. We again, now let's take a look at what do we understand from these two chapters. Very clearly, the personal history of Baldibu is shared in this chapter. We also get to know Baldibu, who is a secondary character, a little more intimately. But again, there are a lot of gaps in the story which allows for the reader to fill in what could have been the past history of Baldibu. Okay, we are told that he is somebody who helped the town to become as successful as it had become. He also acts as a mentor for Herve Joncourt, indicating his generous nature, but he's also mysterious as his life before Lavilledieu is not revealed to us, and his behavior is paradoxical as he helps others to set up their factories without a fear of competition and does not ask Joncourt for a breakup of how the money was spent that he was given to undertake the journey. Okay? So in this case, we almost find him very similar to Herve because both of them are satisfied with what they have earned and have a willingness to help others. They don't desire too much from life. Baldibu is also somebody who is not very interested in participating in life and would only do as much as is needed to have a comfortable life. So here, their personal histories are very, very similar. Baldibu is also guided by his devotion to the Catholic Saint Agnes, and her feast day is January 21st. And it's been indicated that Jonco's entire life was turned around on this particular day because Jonco's father also refers to Saint Agnes in the conversation that he has with Baldibu, where Baldibu says that he should change his career. So, in a way, we might say that Jonco's future might have been decided by Saint Agnes, or his destiny might have been changed by Saint Agnes, as both his father and his mentor invoke her name, and especially on her feast day, that is January 21st. She is supposed to be a saint of virginity as well as sacrifice. Okay, and her sacrifice is what got her the sainthood. And we are told that here also there would be sacrifices required, and that uh, Baldibu refers to Saint Agnes as not liking soldiers, and therefore Joncourt should choose another life rather than the life of a soldier. Now let's move on to chapter 8 to 10 and look at what is there in content in these chapters. So Baldibu thinks that all the world's silkworms carry disease except for Japan, which has been isolated for more than 200 years. And this is an isolation which they have themselves imposed so that they don't have any contact with the outside world. Baldibu is drinking with Joncourt at Cafe Verdun when he mentions how Japan's silk is uncomparable to any other silk that he has seen around the world. Okay. He also mentions Japan, and Joncourt clearly shows that he is unaware of the place, and Baldibu tells him that it is right at the end of the world. Again, in a way, putting down the Japanese, because being at the end of the world also has an indication of being lesser. If you are at the top of the world or at the beginning of the world, that means the world begins with you. Whereas those who are at the end of the world, clearly they are lesser beings. Moreover, the end of the world also carries with it a certain kind of mythical adventure. because many fairy tales, folk tales have this concept of the end of the world, going in search of what is needed to cure something that exists in the society, in the Europe, in the society where the protagonist lives at the end of the world. So there is this mysterious quality to it that is added by the term end of the world. China is 200 miles away from Japan, and by the imperial decree of the Japanese king, only ships of one mast could sail to Japanese harbors, thus making trade difficult even for China, which was nearer than the European countries. In Japan, there was one more rule, which was that immigration was allowed. You could leave the country, but you could not return after that. If you returned after that, it would mean that you would be put to death. The Chinese, Dutch, and the English made many failed attempts to open trade with Japan in the last 200 years, where the European countries were already spreading out to other Asian countries like India, China, Sri Lanka, and other places, and had already opened up different trade routes as well as trade associations with the kings and rulers of these places. Japan was still a place that could not be opened up or reached by these imperial movements. Finally, American Commodore Matthew C. Perry sailed into Yokohama Bay with a steam driven fleet in 1853, thus circumventing the one mast rule. Japanese had never seen a steam driven fleet before that. They had not seen a ship which could run on steam. And so there was no mast, and thus the entire rule of one mast was broken. This finally opened the trade for Japan with other countries, and they opened up two harbors where the trade could be carried out. Now, Baldibu seemed to know all of these information because he comes up with the idea that they should now go out and get the eggs from Japan rather than any other part of the world, because all the other silkworm eggs were infected, but Japanese eggs would not have been infected because of their isolationism that they had practiced for 200 years. And he also mentions the fact that Japanese silk threads are the finest that he has ever held, and nothing can compare to it. Baldibu assembles all the silk manufacturers of Lavilledieu and explains that the Japanese silkworm eggs are not infected and, in fact, are the best. Now, none of the manufacturers, just like Joncourt, has ever heard of Japan. Baldibu explains that the Japanese sell their silk, but they do not sell their eggs. So, to trade in eggs on the island of Japan, as well as to actually bring those eggs out of that country, is considered a crime. A crime which could also end in death. That's how harsh the punishment is. In spite of this, the businessmen did not seem to mind sending out somebody to break the law at the other side of the world. Now let's analyze these chapters. These chapters emphasize how foreign Japan is for the French businessmen in the 19th century. They have not even heard about it. More than Japan's own isolation, it brings into sharp focus the Frenchmen's own perception and attitude towards Japan, which seems like an exotic place and which they are not interested in. They are only interested in it in terms of how they could benefit of that country. That is, how they can bring something back from that country which will help them to progress in their own industry. Some historical background explaining how isolationist the Japanese were at this time period and portraying of the opening of the Japan's foreign trade as a military conquest clearly indicates that Japan did not willingly get into a trade with the other countries. They would have preferred to keep their isolationism rather than get into trade. But because of the breaking of rule and because of the threat from the American military, Japan had to open up its ports for trade. Again, this clearly shows how imperialism was established across the world, how colonizers went about establishing their rule in different countries which they colonized. These chapters emphasize the casualness with which the silk manufacturers consider the risk of traveling to Japan to procure silkworm eggs, and it underscores how little they regard for the laws and customs of the Japanese people, again showing a sense of hegemonic superiority. A typical colonizer mentality can be observed in these chapters through the conversation between Baldebu and the rest of the businessmen in level 2. Baldebu is the person who hatches the plan to send Joncourt on his journey. The word destiny is used to describe Joncourt's journey, which lends to his journey an aura of exoticism and mythical adventure, which is how typically it was portrayed. The entire act of the colonizer leaving for finding or finding new lands which were already lived in by the natives of that place, but every new land found was a discovery and therefore an act of bravery and courage, thus lending a mythical quality to the entire thing. The end of the world also alludes to the end of the peaceful domestic life for Joncourt after meeting the woman in Japan. The word these This particular phrase carries a lot of different meanings throughout the novel, and we keep coming back to this word because it shows different kinds of ends that comes about in the rest of the story. So these set of words or this phrase is again a foregrounder to what is to come after this. Now, in the overall analysis of these chapters, we can clearly see that some of the themes that have been touched upon are again history, the concept of Orientalism. Okay, though Orientalism is something that we read into the text, the author himself does not seem to be aware of being a victim of the concept of Orientalism. His point of view is very clearly Orientalist and colonizers, but he is not aware of it. Therefore, in these sections, we read from a post colonial perspective how the colonizer views a colonized country. There is also touching upon religious beliefs and the concept of fate and destiny in people's life. Some of the techniques that have been used in taking the story ahead is to create a sense of mystery around, again, Japan as well as Baldebu's background. The reader is expected to do a lot of gap filling, which is a very clear postmodernist technique. There is foregrounding constantly in all the chapters that we have read till now. There is use of paradox as well as irony in the entire chapters from 6 to 10. In the next video, I will be covering the analysis of chapters 11 to 15.